SLT presents the 01 Awards on the 4th of March 2020 at the Shangri-La Hotel.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, face to face, Foreign Minister reiterates the government's position on Resolution 40/1 withdrawal and assures fullest support for the officers on missing persons and reparations in meeting with UN Human Rights Head. Calling it, Dr. Palitha Kohuna labels UN Human Rights Head Sri Lanka comments prejudicial and reflective of preconceived notions.
I'm actually disappointed with Bachelet's statement. Her statement reflects prejudice and preconceived positions.
Boom and bust. Verite Research Head says that Sri Lanka's trend of overly optimistic budgets, a sign of insufficient research and analysis.
And what we see here is that Sri Lanka's budgeting process is a person who's always promising to go on diet tomorrow.
Jobs in the mail. Education Minister reveals that 40,000 appointment letters on the way to unemployed graduates. All this and much more coming up on this Saturday, the 29th of February 2020.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
හැටනමයි අනුහතට SMS කර රුපියල් මිලියන 3ක මුල් තැන්ගේ උපකරණ දිනාගෙන අවුරුද්දෙම කුස්සිය ටයිම් සේව් කරගන්න.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando, moving on to your top stories for tonight. Now, following the government's recent defense of its withdrawal from UNHRC Resolution 40/1 and rebuking of the co-sponsored resolutions as undeliverable and a superficial facade that had failed to deliver results, Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena met with UN Human Rights High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet yesterday in Geneva. At the meeting, the Foreign Minister reiterated the government's stance on its withdrawal and assured the UN official of its full support for the implementation of key elements cited as causes for concern in the resolution.
Minister of Foreign Relations Dinesh Gunawardena met with United Nations Human Rights High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet yesterday, where he reiterated the Sri Lankan government's decision to withdraw from the co-sponsorship of Resolution 40/1 and the basis for doing so. The Foreign Minister pointed out in detail a number of areas in the resolution that were undeliverable, which he added was highlighted by his predecessor a year ago at the UNHRC sessions prior to the co-sponsorship. Further, the government's intentions to continue its engagement with the United Nations and its relevant agencies was also stressed. The Foreign Minister also reiterated the government's intentions to fully support the continuation of the Office on Missing Persons and the Office on Reparations with appropriate adaptation in line with the government's policy framework. The delegation also shared its perspective on a number of areas, including the need for closure, adequate funding for reconciliation measures, shortcomings in the former counter-terrorism bill, and the government's intention to undertake a review of the Prevention of Terrorism Act with the view to proposing necessary amendments to its provisions.
Sri Lanka's former permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Palitha Kohuna, is highly critical of the statement made by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, saying that her statement reflects prejudice and preconceived notions. Delivering an oral update on Sri Lanka's human rights at the 10th meeting of the 43rd session, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, expressed regret towards Sri Lanka's move to withdraw from the co-sponsorship of Resolution 40/1, calling it a setback in efforts towards reconciliation, accountability and human rights. Speaking to Indivari Amuwata on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, Dr. Kohuna says that Sri Lanka is fully capable of complying with global human rights standards.
Yes, Sri Lanka, a very bold move to say we will not co-sponsor Resolution 40/1, which also links up to the previous resolutions that Sri Lanka had co-sponsored. But the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, came out to say Sri Lanka hasn't proven that any domestic measures taken have lived up to the expectations of the UN in terms of accountability and human rights.
I'm actually disappointed with Ms. Bachelet's statement. She should know better. Her statement reflects prejudice and preconceived positions which she should have known to rectify. She didn't. If you look at most other countries, you could make the same allegations about them. What is unfortunate is that Sri Lanka gets the headlines. Sri Lanka is the country that the High Commissioner for Human Rights targets in her statements and targets in a very vicious manner.
You've worked very closely with Michelle, so you probably know very well how the system works, how she works, but this is obviously a coordinated effort. But how will Sri Lanka manage the situation going forward? How do you think these nations that brought Sri Lanka to admit and accept the process of accountability will react to this?
The UN did not react in this manner. Michelle Bachelet didn't react in this manner spontaneously. We have a number of Western countries who have over the years put pressure on the UN system, High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN in New York and elsewhere, to adopt a certain approach to Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka has not, in my view, dealt with these pressures in a way that would bring closure. Now, what can we do about this? I don't think there are any quick solutions. We need to start from scratch and start working on these countries and the countries that are favorable to us to convince them that Sri Lanka is not what it's made out to be. Sri Lanka is not an outlier in the international system, and it is not a country that cannot be trusted to live up to international standards.
Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena did say that the resolution was not in line with Sri Lanka's constitution. Regardless of government change, it is Sri Lanka, the state, that has entered into co-sponsoring this resolution. But aren't we bound to oblige or go ahead with our promise or pledge to the Council?
Resolutions of the Human Rights Council cannot be enforced, not by the Council, not by the High Commissioner. But we go along and co-sponsor a resolution against ourselves. One could argue that there is at least a moral obligation on our part to comply with the content of this resolution. It's not going to be an easy task for Sri Lanka to deal with this current situation, but it's a task that we have to deal with because it's our country, it's our future. We are not isolated, we have friends in the world, and of course there are those who hold certain levers of power and influence over us, especially economic levers. We need to keep that in mind. But what is important to remember is that we need to abide by global rules relating to human rights. We actually gave the world certain notions of human rights, so it's not difficult for us to comply with global standards in these areas.
Executive Director of Verite Research Nishan Dimel stated that Sri Lanka's overly optimistic national budgets are a sign of insufficient research and analysis. Dimel added that in this backdrop, Sri Lanka's budgetary planning process is rife with procrastination, which eventually licenses failure in achieving its expectations in the present in the hope of future success. He made these remarks at a forum that was held recently on improving national budget practices and providing solutions for a professional government. A forum on improving national budget practices and providing solutions for a professional government was held recently, organized by Verite Research.
Now, it's impossible to get a revenue projection perfectly right. There are too many unknowns in doing that. But what is clear in these revenue projections is that they're consistently optimistic or over-optimistic. So you may also observe certain cycles here. That is, closer to elections, you tend to fail more in terms of meeting expectations. So we say budgets have boom and bust cycles. And what we see here is that Sri Lanka's budgeting process is a person who's always promising to go on diet tomorrow. Because by saying, well, tomorrow will be better, or I will do better tomorrow, you license yourself to do worse today. But you say, that's okay, because in the next few years, we are going to be right. We need to think about having sufficient research and analysis that formulates a proposal. Having feasibility studies that determine whether the proposal is actually doable. We also need risk and scenario analysis because the world is uncertain. Sri Lanka is a small country. Things can impact us in a way that we don't have to wait for the shock to come like we do in disaster management and floods. Sources of oversight, we are dividing them into two: institutional oversight, but also public oversight. Institutional oversight, we must look at how we improve the impact of that. Public oversight, we have to ask how does the public have the data and information to provide that oversight. So there should be proactive disclosure of data that allow people to understand and provide the kind of oversight that's there. One of the things we think that should happen in controls is minimally an explanation for deviations that are in the budget. What's surprising is that Parliament that debates the budget and approves the budget seems to be not cognizant of the enormous deviations and or the explanation.
Former Minister of Justice Vijaydas Rajapaksa, appearing before the Presidential Commission investigating the Easter Sunday terror attacks, stated that the risk of more attacks still lingers. The MP added that the Parliamentary Select Committee appointed to inquire into the attacks was just a means of whitewashing promoters of terrorism. Meanwhile, Commander of the Army Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva reassured the public that Sri Lanka is safe and sound and that the country's security establishment is fully geared to fend off any further threats. Chairman of the Sectoral Oversight Committee on National Security, Malit Jayatilaka, revealed the existence of an estimated 800 Islamic madrasas within the country that are operating outside the purview of the Department of Muslim Affairs. Meanwhile, former Minister of Justice Dr. Vijaydas Rajapaksa, giving evidence before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter Sunday attacks yesterday, said that certain non-governmental organizations have been providing legal advice to RGP Pujit Jayasundara, who is currently on mandatory leave, in connection with the security failures that led to the attacks. When asked to name the individuals he referred to, the MP revealed that Saman Ratnapriya, Professor Sarath Vijay Surya and President's Counsel J.C. Valyamuna are the individuals concerned. The MP also told the Commission that former President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe had been informed about the issue. He added that several parties were informed in writing to arrest the IGP and the Defence Secretary. The parliamentarian went on to say that the Parliamentary Select Committee appointed to probe the Easter attacks was in violation of the Constitution and parliamentary traditions and was a means of covering up information. The parliamentarian said that through the committee, promoters of terrorism were effectively whitewashed. When questioned whether the President was aware of the possibility of such an attack, the MP said that it was difficult to assume that the President and the Prime Minister were unaware of the possibility, given when such intelligence information was provided by Indian authorities. The attorney who appeared on behalf of the Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, was also given the opportunity to cross-examine Dr. Rajapaksa. The attorney inquired from the parliamentarian as to the culpability of the President and the Prime Minister for the attack, given that they held positions higher than the IGP and the Defence Secretary. The MP said that if they possessed knowledge of the attack, they too had a responsibility to act in this regard. In response to a question by the attorney, the MP said he believes that the threat of another possible attack still lingers. Meanwhile, Army Commander Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva reassured the general public that the country's security apparatus is fully capable of handling any possible threats.
අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා කොහොමත් සෑම සතියෙම ආරක්ෂක කවුන්සිලය ගෙන්නලා ආරක්ෂාව සම්බන්ධව කතා කරනු ලබනවා. රටේ ආරක්ෂාව උපරිමයෙන්ම තිබෙනවා. ජනාධිපතිතුමා මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් සෑම වෙලාවම හොයලා බලනවා. ආරක්ෂක ලේකම්තුමා ඊට අමතරව සෑම සතියකම සාකච්ඡාවක් පවත්වනවා. ඉතින් හින්දා ආරක්ෂාව උපරිමයෙන්ම ජනතාව වෙනුවෙන් රට වෙනුවෙන් ආරක්ෂාව සපයන්න කටයුතු කරලා තියෙන්නේ.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says the country will only be able to fully reap the benefits of the victory accomplished during the presidential election if a parliament majority is assured, as it would empower the governing party's decision-making processes. He made these remarks addressing the gathering at a religious ceremony held in Galle today. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, along with Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, attended a religious ceremony at the Yatagala Rajamahaviharaya in Galle today.
ගාල්ල ඓතිහාසික යටගල රජමහාවිහාරය එමෙන් අනතුරුව අභිනව නායක ස්වාමීන්ද්‍රයන්න් වහන්සේ වෙත පිළිගැන්වීමයි දැන් සිදු කෙරෙන්නේ.
ගිය අවුරුද්දේ නොවැම්බර් මාසයේදී පවත්වපු ජනාධිපතිවරණය. අපි දන්නවා කවුරුත් මහජාතවාදී කුමන්ත්‍රණයක් ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනකොට ඒක ආපස්සට හැරෙව්වේ මේ මහා සංඝරත්නයේ බව මම අමුතුවෙන් කියන්න ඕන නැහැ. වනවාසී ස්වාමින් වහන්සේලා පළවෙනි වතාවට නායක ස්වාමින් වහන්සේ තමන්ගේ ඡන්දය පාවිච්චි කරන්න පැමිණියේ. රටට විය හැකි අය අවුරුදු 5 තුල ඇති වෙච්ච උවදුර අනාගතයේදී ඇති විය හැකි උවදුරෙන් බුදුදහම රැක ගන්න, මේ රට රැක ගන්න, ජාතිය රැක ගන්නයි. මේ රටේ මහ ජනතාවත් අපේ රටේ දේශපාලන යථාර්ථය තේරුම් අරගෙන ඉන්න බව ඒ ජනාධිපති මැතිවරණයේ ප්‍රතිඵලයෙන් අපිට පේනවා. මම හිතනවා නොවැම්බර් 18 වෙනිදා ලබාගත් ඒ ජයග්‍රහණය ලබා ගන්න නම් අපි අනාගතයේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුල 3/2ක බලයක් ලබාගෙන කටයුතු කරන්න අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
Minister of Education, Sports and Youth Affairs Dallas Alahaperuma announced that the mailing of appointment letters to 40,000 unemployed graduates commenced this morning at the Presidential Secretariat. This was part of the President's pledge to bring an end to the woes of the 54,000 unemployed graduates before the 2nd of March.
2012 පස්සේ ඉතුරු වෙච්ච උපාධාරීන් සංඛ්‍යා 54,000. ගෝඨාභය ජනාධිපතිතුමා පොරොන්දුවක් දුන්න රටට මාර්තු 2 වෙනිදා ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ 54,000ටම දෙනවා. නිලධාරීන් ගෙන්නලා ජනාධිපතිතුමා කිව්වා මේ දරුවෝ රටේ බුද්ධිමත්ම දරුවෝ. මේ දරුවෝ දිහා බලන්න එපා පාට කණ්ණාඩියක් දාගෙන. මේ දරුවන්ගේ බුද්ධිය දිහා විතරක් බලන්න. අද උදේ පාන්දර 40,000ක් උපාධි දරුවන්ට පත්වීම් ලිපි තැපල් කරන්න පටන් ගත්තා ජනාධිපති ලේකම් කාර්යාලය.
While China reports a fall in the number of new COVID-19 cases within the country, the rest of the world, however, rushes to take emergency measures to deal with the footing of the virus has taken over in 50 countries. As China steps down from the spotlight of being recognized as the country with the highest number of recorded newly infected COVID-19 cases, South Korea takes center stage now with a reporting of 830 newly affected cases and 1 death reported, bring the country's total number of cases to 3,150 and a death toll of 17, the highest reported outside from mainland China.
With significant declines in the number of newly infected COVID-19 cases in China, its position as the country with the most cases was short-lived, with the virus now having spread to 50 countries across the world. Taking the top spot, South Korea has recorded 813 new cases and 1 death as of the latest reports. South Korea urged its citizens to stay indoors as it warned of a critical moment in its battle against the virus after recording a total of 3,150 cases within the country and a death toll of 17. In contrast, the number of new infected COVID-19 cases reported from China today stands at 433 with a total of 47 deaths. China's total cases now stand at 79,257 with 2,835 total deaths within the country so far. Meanwhile, Iran recorded a total of 205 new coronavirus cases and 9 deaths, pushing the country's total reported cases to 593 and 43 deaths. Qatar's health ministry has reported its first case of coronavirus infection in the country with a 36-year-old Qatari man who was recently evacuated from Iran on a government-chartered plane testing positive. The health ministry, however, reported that the infected man is in stable condition. Taiwan saw a 5% jump in new COVID-19 cases, including 4 people who had contact with another infected patient in a hospital and 1 person returning from the Middle East, bringing its total infected cases to 39. With the number of COVID-19 cases rising in the US, the country has decided to postpone a meeting that was scheduled to be held on the 14th of March with leaders of Southeast Asian countries. With the country's death toll standing at 0, the number of newly infected coronavirus cases stand at 66, as 3 new cases were also reported today. In the meantime, while Australia had been able to contain and curtail the rise in newly infected cases within the country, and with no recorded deaths, the Australian health minister said the country will ban foreign travellers arriving from Iran due to the country's high death rate from the virus. Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt went on to say that the ban will go into effect on the 1st of March and will last for 14 days, where Australian citizens will be allowed to return from Iran during that time, but will be required to self-isolate for 14 days.
The continued increase in the number of cases and the number of affected countries over the last few days are clearly of concern. Our epidemiologists have been monitoring these developments continuously, and we have now increased our assessment of the risk of spread and the risk of impact of COVID-19 to very high at global level.
A multi-party collective of young political figures and civil society representatives have joined hands to launch Truth Square, a platform to combat political disinformation in the lead-up to and during the looming parliamentary elections. The trilingual platform was launched under the theme Trap Disinformation, along with a wider network against disinformation, which has secured the support of the Election Commission. Speaking at Truth Square, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna Urban Councillor Milinda Rajapaksha and Rasika Jayakodi, representing the United National Party, shed light on the digitization of election-related violence in the form of fake news, misinformation and defamatory content. The network led by the Truth Square is due to provide weekly updates on disinformation narratives with the assistance of #Generation and Citizen.lk to the Election Commission, which will enable the Commission to take appropriate steps to combat the narratives, including contacting media heads and political party leaders to correct false narratives. The public is encouraged to and can flag any election-related disinformation they come across by posting under the hashtag #TrapLies, which will be crowdsourced by the voluntary monitors of the network and reported to the Election Commission on a regular basis for corrective action. More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. In your business news, a press release issued by the Statistics Department of the Central Bank reports an increase in year-on-year headline inflation to 6.2% in February 2020 from 5.7% in the previous month. This was driven solely by the statistical effect of the low base prevailing in February 2019, the report highlighted.
The Central Bank Statistics Department issued its monthly inflation report as measured by the Colombo Consumer Price Index today. The report showed that year-on-year headline inflation for the month of February had recorded an increase up to 6.2%, up from 5.7% in January, driven by low base value in February 2019. Meanwhile, year-on-year food inflation for February 2020 was recorded at 14.7%, while non-food inflation was recorded at 2.8%. The change in the CCPI, measured on an annual average basis, increased to 4.6% in February 2020 from 4.5% in January 2020, the report stated, with the monthly change in the CCPI recorded at 0%. Setting off the price effects of items in the food category, which declined by 0.2%, prices in the non-food category increased by the same magnitude. Within the food category, prices of vegetables, rice, big onions, potatoes, sea fish and red onions recorded decreases in February 2020. However, prices of items in the non-food category recorded increases during the month, owing to price increases of the items in transportation, clothing and footwear, and recreation and culture subcategories. Core inflation, which reflects the underlying inflation in the economy, increased to 3.2% in February 2020 from 3% in January 2020 on a year-on-year basis. However, annual average core inflation decreased to 5.1% in February 2020 from 5.3% in January 2020.
International and sports news on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back in your international news. After more than 18 years of conflict, the US and the Taliban have signed an agreement aimed at paving the way towards peace in Afghanistan. The US and its NATO allies have agreed to withdraw all troops from the country within 14 months if the militants uphold their end of the deal. While US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Taliban leaders attended the signing ceremony in Doha in Qatar, talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban are due to follow. According to the agreement, it had been mutually agreed by both parties to not allow the Al-Qaeda or any other extremist group to operate in the areas they control. Despite efforts taken by the militants and US officials to try to find a roadmap to peace, the Islamist group continued to refuse to hold official talks with the Afghan government, dismissing them as American puppets. In your sports news, the Court of Arbitration for Sport has upheld an appeal filed by the World Anti-Doping Agency against Chinese Olympic swimmer Sung Yang and slapped an 8-year ban from all forms of competition for missing an out of competition doping test.
China's most famous athlete, three-time Olympic swimming champion Sun Yang, has been handed the maximum 8-year ban for breaking anti-doping rules.
The Court of Arbitration for Sport has upheld the appeal filed by the World Anti-Doping Agency against the Chinese swimmer Sun Yang and the International Swimming Federation FINA. The athlete is sanctioned with an 8-year suspension starting today. Considering that it is his second anti-doping rule violation, and in the absence of any mitigating circumstances, the panel concluded that an 8-year ban starting on the date of the CAS award, so today, has to be imposed on the athlete. This CAS decision can be appealed at the Swiss Federal Tribunal within 30 days.
That's all we have for tonight. Good night.